My brother-in-law looked straight into the camera during that Monday morning Zoom call and said, "Listen, Frank, if you can't adapt to modern leadership, maybe it's time you step aside and let someone with fresh ideas take the wheel." That's the exact moment I knew this 31-year-old golf club champion had just signed his own professional death warrant. My name is Frank Delaney. I'm 54 years old, and I've been building bridges, literal steel and concrete bridges, for the past 28 years across the state of Georgia. Started as a field surveyor right out of Georgia Tech, worked my way up to senior structural engineer at Callaway & Sons Infrastructure, the third largest civil engineering firm in the Southeast. I've designed overpasses that carry 100,000 cars a day. I've reinforced dams that protect entire counties from flooding. I've got stamps on projects from Savannah to Chattanooga that'll outlast every person reading this. But my brother-in-law, Derek Callaway, that Callaway had decided my 28 years of keeping people alive wasn't worth the chair I was sitting in. Here's the thing about Derek. He married my wife's younger sister, Megan, 3 years ago. Nice wedding, open bar. I even gave a toast. But more importantly, he married into the Callaway family name. And his father-in-law, Big Jim Callaway, decided that was qualification enough to hand him the title of Chief Operating Officer. Never mind that Derek's entire professional experience consisted of managing a chain of CrossFit gyms in Buckhead and somehow losing money doing it. The man couldn't read a load-bearing calculation if you tattooed it on his forearm. That Monday call was supposed to be a routine project update. 14 engineers, 6 project managers, and 4 field supervisors, all dialed in from job sites across the state. I was calling from my home office in Marietta, where I'd been working remotely 3 days a week ever since my daughter Lily got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes last spring. She's 11, needs monitoring, needs her dad close by when her blood sugar crashes at 2 hours in the afternoon, and the school nurse panics. But Derek didn't care about Lily's insulin levels. Derek cared about optics. "Effective immediately," he announced, reading from notes someone else clearly wrote for him. "All senior staff will report to the Atlanta headquarters 5 days a week. No exceptions. Remote work privileges are suspended pending a full review of productivity metrics." I watched 14 faces on that Zoom grid go from bored to furious in about 2 seconds. Half these people had field assignments 3 hours from Atlanta. The other half had been producing their best work from home offices and job site trailers for years. Then he dropped the real bomb. "Additionally, I'm restructuring our project documentation system. All proprietary designs, engineering calculations, and project methodologies will be uploaded to a centralized company server. My office will conduct a full audit of intellectual contributions to determine proper credit allocation and future licensing opportunities." That was corporate speak, and everyone on the call knew it. What Derek actually meant was, "I'm going to take everything you've ever created, put my name on it, and use it to justify my salary to my father-in-law." "Derek," I said, keeping my voice level, 28 years of talking to county inspectors and OSHA regulators teaches you how to stay calm when someone's being dangerously stupid. Does this policy apply to methodologies developed independently outside of contracted project hours? He barely looked at his camera. "Frank, everything that's been developed while you've been employed here belongs to Callaway & Sons. That's standard practice. Even proprietary engineering methods created on personal time with personal resources that aren't connected to any active company project. If it touches infrastructure, it's ours. That's just how this industry works." He smiled, that country club smile. "But honestly, Frank, I wouldn't worry about it too much. Most of your legacy systems are going to be phased out anyway. We're moving toward AI-integrated design platforms. AI-integrated design platforms. The man couldn't explain the difference between a canal lever and a crossbeam, but he'd read enough LinkedIn articles to throw around buzzwords. The call went quiet. My colleague, Rosa Martinez, who'd been with the firm for 19 years, unmuted just long enough to say, "This is insane," then muted herself again. "Thanks for the clarity, Derek," I said. "I appreciate knowing exactly where I stand." I closed my laptop, kissed my daughter on the forehead as she sat at the kitchen table doing math homework, walked into my garage office and opened a fireproof safe that held something Derek didn't know existed, Because here's what Derek Calloway never understood about me. I don't react, I prepare. 8 months before Derek ever became COO, back when Big Jim was still just dropping hints about bringing family into the leadership structure, I saw this coming. I've survived 4 management shakeups, 2 hostile corporate mergers, and a near bankruptcy in 2009 that almost destroyed the firm. I know what it looks like when someone's about to torch a company from the inside. I can smell it like a gas leak. So, I'd spent those 8 months building something extraordinary, something completely separate from anything I'd ever done for Calloway & Sons. I called it the Delaney method. It was a proprietary structural analysis system, a mathematical framework for rapid bridge assessment that could evaluate load-bearing integrity in a fraction of the time traditional methods required. I'm talking about cutting a 6-week assessment process down to 9 days with better accuracy. The Georgia Department of Transportation had been begging the industry for something like this for years, and I'd built it entirely on my own computer, my own time. Every Saturday morning for 8 months while Lily was at soccer practice and my wife Karen was volunteering at the church food pantry. Every calculation logged, time-stamped, and backed up on 3 separate encrypted drives. Witness signatures from 2 engineering colleagues who had nothing to do with Calloway & Sons. A provisional patent filed with the United States Patent and Trademark Office 4 months before. Derek even knew what a COO was supposed to do. The day after that Zoom call, I didn't go to the office. I drove 45 minutes south to the law office of Alan Whitfield, my college roommate who traded engineering for intellectual property law and never looked back. Frank Allen said, spreading my documentation across his conference table like he was reviewing blueprints for a cathedral. You've been planning this since before Derek got the job. Since the day Big Jim mentioned bringing family into operations, and you never used a single company resource, no company laptop, no company software licenses, no company data, not a byte. I even bought my own CAD software subscription, separate email account, separate cloud storage. I've got receipts for everything. Alan leaned back in his chair and let out a slow whistle. You know what this is, Frank? This is the cleanest IP separation I've ever seen. Most engineers couldn't prove independent development if their lives depended on it. You've got documentation that would make a federal judge weep with joy. Navy fathers raise thorough sons, I said. My dad served 20 years on submarines. Taught me one thing above all else. If you can't document it, it didn't happen. So, what's the play? Alan asked. Derek's been telling the board he's going to win the Georgia DOT bridge modernization contract. That's a $200 million 10-year project. The proposal is due in 6 weeks. And the centerpiece of Calloway's bid is supposed to be a revolutionary rapid assessment methodology. Let me guess, your methodology. He doesn't know it's mine. He saw a preliminary presentation I gave last year at an internal meeting. Thought it was company work. Told his father-in-law he could deliver it as part of the proposal. But the actual system, the math, the algorithms, the validation data, all of that is sitting on my personal server in my garage. Nothing's on company systems, and his new IP policy basically confirmed on the record that he's trying to claim it on a recorded company Zoom call with 24 witnesses. Alan closed the folder. Frank, I need you to understand something. This isn't just a civil matter. If Derek submits your proprietary work in a state government contract bid without authorization, that's fraud. State procurement fraud. That's criminal. I know you've been sitting on this for 8 months. I've been sitting on this like a copperhead in tall grass. The next 4 weeks played out exactly the way I expected because people like Derek are predictable. They're always predictable. Week 1. Derek's hand-picked team of 3 junior engineers started trying to build the rapid assessment system from scratch using the fragments they'd pulled from my old presentation slides. The presentation had the concept. It did not have the math. It was like trying to build a car from a photograph of a car. My buddy, Walt Chen, who still worked in the structural department, started feeding me updates over beers at the Marietta Brewing Company every Thursday. It's a circus, Frank. Derek brought in 2 consultants from some firm in Charlotte. They took one look at what the junior guys built and said it was, and I quote, structurally incoherent. Derek screamed at them for 20 minutes. Week 2, Derek started calling me. I let every call go to voicemail. The messages evolved from casual to concerned to desperate. "Hey Frank, just checking in. Wanted to discuss some project continuity stuff. Frank, listen. I think we got off on the wrong foot. Call me back. Frank, this is urgent. We need your input on the DOT proposal. This is bigger than whatever personal disagreement we're having." I saved every voicemail. Alan said they'd be useful later. Week 3. Karen got a call from her sister Megan. "Karen, you need to talk to Frank. Derek says he's being unreasonable." Karen, bless her soul, said, "Megan, my husband spent 28 years building things that keep people alive. Your husband spent 3 years losing money on kettlebells. I think I know which one's being unreasonable." Thanksgiving dinner was going to be interesting that year. Week 4. 2 weeks before the DOT proposal deadline, I got a phone call that changed everything. "Mr. Delaney, this is Patricia Hancock, Deputy Director of Procurement for the Georgia Department of Transportation." My heart rate stayed steady, but my grip tightened on my coffee mug. "Yes, ma'am. How can I help you?" "We've received your patent filing and independent capability statement. We'd like to schedule a meeting to discuss your rapid assessment methodology directly. We understand you're no longer affiliated with Callaway & Sons." "That's correct, ma'am. I'm operating as an independent engineering consultant." "Good, because we have some concerns about the Callaway proposal that we'd like to address. Can you come to our Atlanta office next Tuesday?" I put down the coffee mug and called Alan. "It's happening. How fast?" "DOT wants a meeting next Tuesday. They know about the patent. They know I'm independent. Frank, once DOT realizes the core methodology in Callaway's proposal belongs to you and not the company, that proposal is dead. And if they determine Callaway submitted proprietary technology without authorization in a government bid, state procurement fraud, minimum, possibly federal, if any of those bridge projects touch interstate highways, which, by the way, every single one of them does." I called Karen from the driveway. She was inside helping Lily with her insulin pump, the same routine we'd perfected over the past year. The routine Derek thought was less important than me sitting in an office chair in Atlanta. "How's our girl?" I asked. "Numbers are good today. She's asking if you'll make your famous chili tonight. Tell her yes. And Karen, things are about to get complicated with your sister's family." Long silence. "How complicated?" "Derek's about to learn a very expensive lesson about stealing from engineers." "Frank Delaney. Should I be worried?" "Not about us. Our mortgage, Lily's medical bills, her college fund. All of that's about to be more secure than it's ever been. And Derek. That's between Derek and the state of Georgia." The meeting at DOT headquarters was clinical, professional, devastating. Patricia Hancock sat across from me with 2 procurement officers and a state attorney. I brought Alan 3 binders of documentation and the quiet confidence of a man who'd spent 8 months preparing for exactly this conversation. Alan walked them through the timeline. My provisional patent filed months before Derek became COO. My development logs, every entry time-stamped and witnessed. My independent software licenses purchased with personal funds, receipts attached. My methodology validation data generated on personal hardware with no connection to Callaway networks. Then we showed them Callaway's proposal draft, which they'd received as part of the bidding process side by side with my patent documentation. The state attorney's pen stopped moving. She looked up at Patricia Hancock. Patricia Hancock looked at me. "Mr. Delaney," she said slowly, "are you telling us that the core technology in Callaway & Sons' $200 million proposal was developed by you independently and submitted by the company without your knowledge or authorization?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you, ma'am. And you have documentation proving this?" 8 months of documentation. Every line, every calculation, every iteration. Patricia closed the binder. "I think we've seen enough. Mr. Whitfield, we'll be in contact with your office regarding next steps. Mr. Delaney, I'd strongly suggest you don't discuss this meeting with anyone at Callaway & Sons. Wouldn't dream of it." What happened next, I mostly heard secondhand, but the pieces came together like a collapsed bridge in reverse. You could see exactly where each failure led to the next. 3 days after my DOT meeting, Callaway & Sons received an official letter from the Georgia Department of Transportation. The letter informed them that their proposal for the bridge modernization contract was suspended pending a procurement integrity review. No further details provided. Walt told me Derek's reaction was volcanic. He apparently threw a chair in the conference room, which would have been more impressive if it wasn't one of those rolling office chairs that just kind of bounced off the wall. Big Jim called an emergency board meeting. Walt reported over our Thursday beers. Derek tried to explain that the methodology was company property. Big Jim asked him to show proof. Eric couldn't produce a single development log, a single original file. Nothing. Just your old presentation slides from last year. The board went silent. 5 days later, 2 investigators from the Georgia Attorney General's office showed up at Callaway & Sons Atlanta headquarters. They carried a subpoena for all records related to the DOT proposal, including emails, development files, and intellectual property documentation. Derek's name was on the proposal as lead architect of the methodology. The methodology he couldn't explain, couldn't reproduce, couldn't prove he'd ever touched. Walt said he walked past Derek's office that afternoon and saw him staring at his computer screen like a man watching his house burn down from the inside. "Frank," Walt said, his voice dropping, "I think he finally realizes what? That he stole something from the one person in the building who knew exactly how to prove it. The dominoes fell fast after that." The Georgia AG's investigation confirmed that Callaway & Sons had submitted proprietary technology in a government bid without authorization from the actual inventor. This triggered an automatic disqualification from the DOT contract. But it also triggered something worse, a formal review of every active Callaway project that had used any methodology or design framework I developed during my time there. Turns out, when you build bridges for 28 years, your fingerprints are on a lot of things. Big Jim Callaway tried damage control. He fired Derek within 72 hours of the AG's visit. Not a quiet resignation, not a graceful exit, fired. Escorted out of the building by the same security guard who'd been waving him into the executive parking garage every morning. Megan called Karen in tears. Karen listened because that's what sisters do, and then said something I'll never forget. "Megan, I love you, but your husband tried to take food off my daughter's table. I'm not going to apologize for my husband protecting his family." Christmas was definitely going to be awkward. The Callaway board brought in outside counsel to manage the crisis. They settled with the state for a significant fine, agreed to enhanced compliance monitoring, and issued a formal acknowledgement that the Delaney method was my independent intellectual property with no connection to the firm. That acknowledgement was the key because 3 weeks later, I sat down in a glass-walled conference room in downtown Atlanta with the executive team at Harrow Mitchell Engineering, the second-largest infrastructure firm in the Southeast and Callaway's biggest competitor. Mr. Delaney said their CEO, a sharp woman named Catherine Xiao, who'd built her company from a 2-person shop indicator. "We've been watching the Callaway situation very closely, and we've been studying your patent filings even more closely. I appreciate your interest, ma'am. I'm going to be direct. We want exclusive rights to the Delaney method for our DOT contract proposals, and we want you to lead implementation, not as a consultant. As our new Vice President of Structural Innovation." She slid a folder across the table. I opened it. I'm not going to tell you the exact number, but I will tell you that when I showed Karen that evening, she sat down on the kitchen floor and cried. Happy tears. The kind of tears you cry when you realize your daughter's medical bills are covered forever. Her college fund is overflowing and the mortgage on your house is about to be a memory. "Frank," she whispered, "is this real?" "It's real, and it's ours." "What about Lily's insulin supplies? The specialist visits? Executive health plan? Full coverage, no co-pays?" She grabbed my hand. "You planned this, all of it." "I planned for the worst. The best just happened to show up." My first week at Harrow Mitchell, I implemented something I called the Creator's Protocol. Every engineer gets clear documentation guidelines. Every independent innovation gets proper attribution. Every piece of intellectual property gets tracked from conception to deployment. No ambiguity, no gray areas, no room for someone like Derek to ever claim what isn't his. Catherine asked me why I was so thorough. Because I've seen what happens when a company treats its engineers like replaceable parts. I said, you lose the people who actually build things, and then you're left with people who can only talk about building things. Speaking from experience. Speaking from 28 years and one very expensive lesson that someone else paid for. 3 months into the new job, Walt called me. He'd left Callaway, too. Half the senior staff had and landed at a solid firm in Savannah. Frank, you hear about Derek? Haven't been keeping tabs. He's managing a parking garage in Kennesaw. My buddy drove through last week, saw him in a reflective vest waving people toward open spots. I thought about that for a moment. A man who tried to steal a $200 million engineering methodology now directing minivans into parking spaces. Walt, I don't take pleasure in that. Really. I take pleasure in the fact that my daughter's medical care is secured, that my wife doesn't have to worry about bills, that I'm building something meaningful at a company that respects what I do. Derek's parking garage is Derek's problem. You're a better man than me, Frank. I'm not a better man. I'm just a man who ran out of energy for grudges about 20 years ago. I've got bridges to build, and I meant that literally. 6 months after joining Hardgrove Mitchell, we won the DOT Bridge Modernization contract, the full $200 million. The Delaney method was the centerpiece of the proposal, and the State Procurement Office approved it without hesitation, because this time the inventor's name was on the bid, right where it belonged. The day we got the call, I was sitting in my new corner office overlooking Peachtree Street. Catherine popped champagne. The engineering team cheered. Someone hung a banner that read, "Welcome to the future of Georgia infrastructure," which was cheesy, but I didn't mind. I stepped out onto the balcony and called Karen. We got it. Got what? The DOT contract. $200 million. 10 years. Silence. Then a shaky breath. Frank Delaney, you did it. We did it. Every Saturday morning, you took Lily to soccer so I could work in the garage. Every night, you didn't ask questions when I was up late running calculations. You did this as much as I did. Come home early tonight. Lily wants to make cookies. I'll be there by 5. I hung up and looked out over Atlanta. Somewhere out there on a piece of highway I'd helped design 15 years ago. 100,000 people were driving home to their families without ever thinking about the engineering underneath their tires. That's the job. You build things that keep people safe. And, if you're lucky, nobody ever notices because nothing ever breaks. Derek noticed, though. He noticed the day everything broke. Every morning, when I walk into Harriv Mitchell, past the framed photos of completed projects and the awards on the lobby wall, I think about what Derek said to me on that Zoom call. Step aside and let someone with fresh ideas take the wheel. Best career advice I ever got. Sometimes the strongest bridge you'll ever build isn't made of steel and concrete. It's made of preparation, patience, and knowing exactly when to let someone else's weight bring down their own structure. Thanks for listening, and remember, document everything, protect your work, and never underestimate an engineer with a fireproof safe and 8 months of free weekends, because by the time you realize we've been preparing, it's already too late. Unless you're my former brother-in-law, then you're just directing.